This story happened to me while I was studying in Boston. I stayed in a hostel that had a reputation for strange, unexplainable incidents. Paranormal activity, to be exact. You know how every school, college, or hostel seems to have those eerie tales? At first, I didn't take it seriously. The hostel was always bustling with students, so even when we heard odd noises, we brushed them off. Life went on. A year into my stay, a new group of students arrived. Among them was Ashley. She was sweet, quiet, and quickly became my closest friend. We ended up as roommates, and it felt like I had found a sister away from home. Everything was normal until Easter rolled around. Most of the local students left to celebrate with their families, leaving just a handful of us, about 10 or 12 girls, at the hostel. We decided to celebrate together. That day was fun. We attended church, partied, and wandered around the city. By the time we returned to the hostel, that evening we were exhausted. After dinner, we sat outside on the benches, talking and laughing. Slowly, the group dispersed, each girl heading back to her room. Ashley was the last one left on the bench. Her head was buried in her hands, and when I got closer, I realized she was crying. I sat beside her, worried. "Ashley, what's wrong?" She didn't answer. Another girl joined me and suggested, "Maybe she's missing her family." That seemed logical. Ashley was far from home, and she had mentioned feeling homesick before. But she didn't say a word. Instead, she suddenly stood up and rushed to our room without looking back. Confused and concerned, I followed her, along with the other girl. By the time we reached our room, the commotion had drawn the attention of the others. All the remaining girls gathered outside. Inside, Ashley was sobbing uncontrollably. We tried to comfort her, but she wouldn't speak. Eventually, she collapsed on her bed, exhausted, and fell asleep. The others laughed, telling me to keep an eye on her since I was her roommate. I stayed awake for a while, but exhaustion took over me, and I drifted off. About an hour later, I woke up to the sound of heavy breathing. At first, I thought it was Ashley having a bad dream, but as I turned on the light, my heart froze. Ashley was sitting upright on her bed, rocking back and forth. Her breathing was loud and rigid, and her face was hidden by her hair. But there was something about her posture, something wrong. I called out to her, "Ashley!" She didn't respond. Then, as she slowly turned her head toward me, I screamed. Her eyes were wild, almost unrecognizable. Her face twisted into a grotesque expression, and for a moment I was certain this wasn't Ashley. My scream woke everyone up. The other girls and the warden rushed to our room. Ashley, still sitting on her bed, began throwing things, lamps, books, anything within reach. She was yelling, but her voice didn't sound like hers. The warden stepped in, trying to calm her. "Ashley, stop this right now!" But Ashley wasn't listening. She lunged at the warden, and for a petite girl, her strength was unreal. It took all of us to restrain her, and even then she fought like someone possessed. The warden finally managed to grab a locket and a small bottle of holy water from her room. She tied the locket around Ashley's neck and sprinkled the holy water on her. Instantly, Ashley's body went limp and she fell unconscious. We were all shaken, but the warden seemed almost unfazed. Once Ashley was calm, she explained, "This isn't the first time. There's a spirit tied to this hostel, a very old one. It doesn't harm people unless it senses deep sadness or vulnerability. Ashley must have been its latest target." The warden revealed she kept the holy water and locket on hand after experiencing a similar incident years ago. An hour later, Ashley woke up. She looked confused and asked, "What happened? Why does my body hurt so much?" The warden reassured her, saying, "You just had a bad episode. Get some rest." She then told the rest of us to return to our rooms. That night, I barely slept. Even now, years later, I can't forget Ashley's twisted face and the sheer terror of that night. This is a story from my past that I never thought I'd share, but maybe talking about it will help me make sense of it. Or at least give you all a warning about the things that can hide in the dark. My name's Ryan, and I grew up in a quiet little town in Oregon. My family wasn't big, just my parents, my younger sister Natasha, and me. Natasha was 19 at the time, and I was 24 after I moved to Seattle for work. Every summer, I'd come back to visit. It was our tradition. Something we all cherished, especially our parents, who loved having us home for those couple of months. But that summer, something happened that I'll never forget. At first, everything felt normal. Natasha was her usual bubbly self, always smiling, always full of energy. But that changed the day she came back from a walk in the woods behind our house. Now let me tell you about these woods. They weren't some creepy overgrown forest, just a small patch of trees and dirt trails, nothing special. Growing up, Natasha and I spent hours there. We'd play games, build forts, and just escape from everything else. It was our place. But this time, something felt wrong. The day after Natasha returned from her walk, she started acting off. It was subtle at first. She seemed distracted, distant, like she wasn't really there. But that night, things took a turn. I woke up to hear her laughing in her room. The thing is, it wasn't her normal laugh. It was low and guttural, like it was coming from someone or something else. I shot up in bed, heart racing. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't ignore it. When I went to check on her, she was sitting in the corner of her room, facing the wall. When I called her name, she turned her head just slightly. Her eyes weren't right. They were bloodshot and wide, almost glowing in the dark. "Natasha?" I whispered, voice shaky. She didn't respond. Then she smiled at me, but not her usual sweet smile. This one was cold, eerie, and it sent a chill straight through me. That was only the beginning. The night got worse. Doors would open and close on their own. I'd feel a cold breeze in my room, even though all the windows were shut. And Natasha's behavior, God, it just kept getting stranger. She'd start muttering to herself, saying things like, "He's watching, he's here." I don't know who he was, but I had a bad feeling about it. My parents tried to brush it off, but I could tell they were freaked out. They didn't want to believe it was something supernatural, but we all felt it. There was something wrong with Natasha, something that wasn't her. Then, one night, I woke up to a scream. It was my dad. I rushed into Natasha's room, and when I saw her, my blood ran cold. She was lying on the bed, but her body was arched in a way that she didn't look human. Her head was tilted back so far, her eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Her mouth was moving, but it wasn't her voice. She was muttering words in a language I didn't recognize. My dad was trying to pull her back, but her body was rigid, like a doll. That's when I grabbed her, shaking her hard. "Natasha, snap out of it!" I shouted, panic in my chest. And just like that, she went limp. She fell back onto the bed, her breathing shallow and rapid, but her face was covered in tears. She whispered, "Make him leave, please." The next morning, we called someone we never thought we would. The local pastor. My mom was desperate, and honestly, so were we. The pastor arrived that evening. He entered Natasha's room, his face grim, and began sprinkling holy water and reciting verses. Natasha was quiet, calm, even until the pastor started praying directly over her. That's when she screamed. But it wasn't Natasha's voice anymore. It was deep. It was angry. It felt like whatever was inside her was trying to fight back. The pastor didn't stop. He kept praying until Natasha collapsed, her body limp and her breathing slow and steady. For the first time in days, her face even looked peaceful. The next morning, Natasha didn't remember any of it. She didn't remember laughing in the middle of the night or staring blankly at the wall. She didn't remember begging for help. She thought we were just messing with her. But I knew better. To this day, I still hear her laughter in my nightmares. That summer changed everything for us. Natasha doesn't go near those woods anymore, and every time I think about what happened to her, I can't shake the feeling that we only just barely escaped something dark and ancient. Something that wasn't ready to let go. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's this: sometimes things are better left unexplored. Don't ever underestimate the power of the unknown. You never know what might be lurking in the shadows. When I moved to San Francisco for college, I was excited to start a new chapter in my life. I didn't know a single soul in the city, so I ended up staying at a budget hostel near campus. It wasn't the most glamorous place, but I figured it would do until I got my bearings. My room, 306, was small but private. That first day was exhausting, and after setting up my room, I collapsed onto the bed, ready to start fresh the next morning. But the night, things got strange. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of soft footsteps pacing in my room. My heart raced as I scanned the darkness. The room was empty. I thought maybe it was just the old wooden floors creaking, so I tried to brush it off. Then came a knock at my door. It wasn't loud, just 3 soft taps. Groggy and annoyed, I shuffled to open it. The hallway was deserted. Confused, I leaned out, glancing both ways. Nothing. The next morning, I mentioned it to the hostel warden, an older woman with sharp eyes and a tight bun. She gave me a strange look and said, "Sometimes these old buildings, they have history. Don't think too much about it. Just rest." That didn't sit right with me, but I chalked it up to the creaks and quirks of an old building. I had no idea what I was in for. The knocks came back the next night. 3 soft taps, then silence. Each time I opened the door, the hallway was empty. Over the next week, it happened so often I stopped checking. I told myself it was probably just a prank by one of the other residents. One night, while scrolling on my phone in bed, I felt it, a soft tug on my hair. I froze. Slowly, I turned my head, but no one was there. The room felt oppressively quiet, as if it were holding its breath. A faint whisper broke the silence. It was coming from the window. I crept toward it, every instinct screaming at me to stop pulling back the curtain. I expected to see something, but there was only the empty street below. I looked the window and climbed back into bed, willing myself to sleep. The next morning, I was getting ready in front of the mirror when I saw it. A shadowy figure standing behind me. My chest tightened as I spun around, but the room was empty. I needed air. Grabbing my bag, I left to explore the city, hoping to distract myself. But when I returned to my room that evening, a cold chill greeted me as I opened the door. It was like walking into a freezer. I checked the thermostat. It was off. Then came the bathroom noises. At first, it was just the faint sound of dripping water, but soon it escalated to thuds and what sounded like shuffling feet. My stomach dropped when I remembered I had locked the bathroom door before leaving. I couldn't bring myself to open it. Instead, I bolted to the warden's office. "Please," I begged. "Can you check my room? Something's not right." She followed me back, her face unreadable. When we opened the bathroom door, it was empty, but I noticed her glance linger on the mirror, her lips pressing into a thin line. Things escalated when Jenna moved in a few weeks later. She was upbeat and full of energy, a complete contrast to my frazzled state. I told her about the knocks and shadows, but she just laughed. "You've been watching too many horror movies," she teased. But her skepticism didn't last long. One night, we both heard it. Faint whispers coming from the hallway. We crept out of her room, our bare feet silent on the cold floor. The whisper led us to the door at the end of the corridor. Room 312. The door was locked, but the whispers continued, growing louder. Jenna grabbed my arm. "Let's go back," she whispered. We bolted to our room, locking the door behind us. The breaking point came a week later. Jenna woke me up in the middle of the night, her face pale. "There's someone under my bed," she whispered, trembling. "Jenna, it's nothing. You're just..." Before I could finish, the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. The room was silent except for our breathing. Then we heard it, a low, guttural laugh coming from beneath Jenna's bed. When the lights flickered back on, there was no one there. The next morning, we packed our bags as we left. I caught the warden watching us from her office window. Her expression wasn't one of surprise. It was almost relief. Years later, I came across an article about the hostel. Room 312 had been sealed off for decades after a resident died under mysterious circumstances. As for room 306, the article didn't say much, only that it had been involved. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that the warden knew more than she ever let on. What happened in those rooms, and who or what was haunting me, I'll never know. If you ever find yourself in an old building with a history, think twice before ignoring the signs. You never know what might be lurking in the dark.